Have you been thinking about making a Game Boy emulator? Maybe you saw a video telling you should, but you're not sure if you're ready, if you know enough, and have enough experience, or the right kind of experience. Well, let's try to answer that. I'll start with the least experience and go from there. At the end, I'll give you an idea for a smaller project that I think makes a good test to know if you're ready. I've also set up some chapters, if you want to skip to a section that applies to you. And of course, this is all just my opinion. If you want to go ahead with making a Game Boy emulator, but something I said makes you think you shouldn't, feel free to just ignore me. What do I even know? I definitely don't want to be the reason someone gives up on a project they're really interested in. So if you want to do it, go for it. If you end up feeling like you're not quite ready for a Game Boy emulator, but want a similar project, you can try a Chip 8 emulator. I don't know anything about it, but a bunch of people think it could be a better starting point for getting into emulator development. Okay, let's say you are someone with zero programming experience. You're just starting out. First of all, that's awesome. I hope you have as much fun learning to program as I did. But should writing a Game Boy emulator be the first project you tackle? Honestly, I'd have to say no. It's not the kind of project that can give you those early wins that will help motivate you to keep going. You're going to have to learn a fair bit of programming and a lot about the Game Boy's architecture before you start getting any traction on the project. You might just end up getting frustrated and giving up, not just on making the emulator, but learning to program entirely. So, what should you do, and what should you expect if you ignore me and go for it anyway? You should probably focus on your core learning first. If you're in school or in a boot camp, try to focus on that, and the assignments and projects that go along with it. If you're learning on your own, you'll want to make sure you're doing small projects that go along with what you're learning. Hopefully, whatever resources you're using to learn, have some of those. Otherwise, you're going to have to come up with some yourself, or find them elsewhere, which could be hard. You'll also want to start learning a bit about the Game Boy's technical details. A great place to start is the Ultimate Game Boy Talk. To get a better feel for how computers work at a low level, I recommend Ben Eater's channel. In particular, the 8-bit CPU from Scratch series. Of course, if you're taking on this project with no programming experience, then you're going to need to be prepared for a lot of frustration. That's a normal part of programming, and definitely a normal part of taking on a project that's going to be pushing you past your current abilities. You'll also need to be prepared for it to take a long time, and along the way you're probably going to realize a bunch of times that you've done everything wrong and might need to rewrite parts or all of it. That's also normal. If you look back at your code from a week ago and you hate it, that's because you've become a better programmer since then. Now, let's say you know how to program, but you're still new to it. Should you start writing a Game Boy emulator? I think you should. At least if it's something that seems exciting. If your only reason is that some guy on the internet told you it was a good idea, you should probably just ignore that person and find something that's more interesting, or at least pays better. Don't get me wrong though. It's still going to be hard. Knowing how to program is only a small part of it. You still have a lot of experience to build. The good news is that this project is going to help you build some of that experience. The bad news is that it's going to be painful. Well, some of it will be, and hopefully it'll be the fun kind of pain. In fact, there's a good chance you're going to get off to a rough start. That's because figuring out where to start on a project like this is hard. You may not have experience with this type of ambiguity while programming before, where there's multiple valid starting points, and you may not have enough information to even list them all, let alone decide which one to go with. Another problem is that you won't have someone more experienced than you to give you feedback and guidance. Getting constructive feedback on your work is a benefit of getting a programming job at a company with a strong culture of cooperation and mentorship. Of course, nobody's going to hire you to make a Game Boy emulator, so you get more freedom on a personal project anyway. Now, what I hope you'll get from a project like this is, broadly, an appreciation for the challenges involved in running a large project. The experience of planning the project and splitting the work into manageable tasks won't necessarily teach you the perfect ways to do those things, but it should give you a better place to start the next time you have to do it, and you'll have some context to better understand other people's decisions if you ever find yourself working on a large project with more experienced people. I also hope that this project will help build your tolerance for making mistakes, because you're probably going to make a bunch of them. Having the confidence to know that you can deal with them when they happen is super valuable. So what about if you already have a bunch of experience, but it's the wrong kind of experience? Maybe you're a front-end web developer, or your experience is in data processing and analysis. Or maybe you work for a life insurance company where you manage to work your way from a clerical role into the IT department as a programmer. Should you try to make a Game Boy emulator? Sure, I think so at least. You already know how to program, which is good, but more importantly, you've already worked on non-trivial projects before. Hopefully you have some idea of what goes into planning a large project. Maybe you've even led one yourself. Or maybe you've been working solo this entire time, so you have experience dividing a project into manageable tasks and milestones. You'll also have experience interpreting technical and non-technical information to help you work towards a goal. So what if all that experience was just used to build a React app, a data pipeline, or a collection of scripts that help to validate insurance payments? Maybe you don't have the specific low-level experience needed to build an emulator. So what? It's just more to learn. And hopefully, you've had a lot of experience learning new things as a programmer. It's all for fun anyway. If you want something to get your feet wet with respect to low-level things, you can try your hand at some Game Boy assembly programming. Grab the RGBDS assembler, a good emulator that gives you debugging tools like BGB, and find a guide to get started. That will expose you to some of the low-level details of the Game Boy's inner workings. And if you've never done any assembly programming before, it can be a real eye-opener. It'll give you a new perspective on things like call stacks and passing arguments to functions. And it'll really make you appreciate all the conveniences of high-level programming languages. And speaking of high-level languages, maybe you're wondering if the programming language you know is the right one to use to build a Game Boy emulator. Yes it is. I mean, assuming it's Turing complete. You can use any programming language you want. I don't really recommend something like Intercal or Brainfuck, but hey, it's your life. All you really need is a way to read and manipulate binary data. Some kind of graphics library that lets you manipulate individual pixels, a UI system that lets you display graphics and handle input, and an audio library to let you make the bleeps and bloops of the Game Boy. Some people scoff at the idea of writing a Game Boy emulator in JavaScript, but JavaScript and the web platform are actually really well suited for it these days. It has typed arrays for dealing with binary data. The Canvas API gives you pixel-level access to graphics. It has user input handling, including gamepad support. And the Web Audio API gives you low-level, though complicated, access to audio generation. Really, the biggest issues I can think of are precise timing and maybe fighting with the browser's event loop. There are people writing Game Boy emulators in Rust. A lot of people seemed interested in trying out Zig, a language I only heard about because of comments from my last video. Python's another great language to try. And of course, the classics, C and C++. If there's another language that you think would be fun or interesting to use, let me know in the comments. Okay, now on to the project I mentioned at the start. The one I think makes a good test to see if you're at the right place to start building a Game Boy emulator. And don't worry if you're not able to do this project quickly and easily. In fact, if you're starting with no experience and you're able to work your way to finishing this test project, then you've probably learned enough to start work on an actual emulator. The project I have in mind is to decode and print the header data from a Game Boy ROM. You see, near the start of a Game Boy ROM's data, there's a little section with information about the game itself, like title, cartridge type, size, things like that. You can find information about it in the pandocs under the cartridge header. I'll link to it in the video description. The pandocs give you a bunch of ROM addresses in hexadecimal and tells you what the data at those addresses mean. So the project is to write a program that can read in a ROM file, decode the header, and print out all the individual bits of information. Your emulator is going to need some of this information anyway, like the cartridge type and ROM RAM sizes. As an added challenge, you can validate that the header checksum and global checksum are correct. Doing this project will get your feet wet, reading and understanding the pandocs. You're going to be referring to the pandocs a lot while building your emulator, and they're not always easy to understand. This project will also get you started reading in a ROM file and dealing with binary data. This isn't enough to build an emulator. You're still going to need to learn how to decode machine code instructions and about the Game Boy's memory map. You'll have to learn about how the Game Boy graphics work, and you'll have to figure out how to manage timing and keeping the main CPU and the graphics system in sync. But learning all that stuff and figuring those things out is kind of the point of building a Game Boy emulator. After all, we already have all the working Game Boy emulators we as a civilization will likely ever need. But we always need curious people learning new things, having new ideas. So have fun and learn something. Oh, if you want to make a Game Boy emulator, you should probably know what a Game Boy is too, and what playing games on it is like. Maybe I should have mentioned that earlier.